Welcome back to the Demystifying Self-Publishing Podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa, and today I am joined by Tellwell's very own Simon Page. Thank you so much for being here today, Simon. I'm excited to chat all things distribution, and I'm sure it's going to be a very educational episode for our audience as well. Do you mind just chatting a little bit about yourself to get started?
A pleasure to be here. Big fan of the podcast, Alyssa. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, as you mentioned, I am an employee at Tellwell. I am the operations manager here. I oversee all steps in the publishing process. So that's from the very start, onboarding, orientation, through editing, design, marketing, and then we get to distribution, which is this very kind of on the surface, sort of dry and boring topic. Almost seems that way, but it's actually happening at the most exciting, most emotional, sort of biggest moment for the author. This is the moment where the book becomes available to the world. So your baby all of a sudden has legs and is walking out there on its own, and that's pretty exciting.
Absolutely. As somebody who has gone through the self-publishing process myself, there's so much excitement throughout the journey of connecting with a publishing consultant, submitting your manuscript, having, for me, with a children's book, the side-by-side text and the illustrations, and then seeing that come to life in a physical format that you're able to order online or in some cases go and pick right off of a bookshelf. And I can only imagine in your role being able to see that process happen so many times over and over and know that feeling for authors. It's got to be a really fulfilling feeling for you too.
Absolutely. It is one of those things where from my end, when it's going well, I shouldn't even know what's happening other than seeing the emails from authors and the photos of authors getting their books and being really excited. It's like, if everything's going smoothly, I shouldn't even know about it. It's just out in the world and everything's happening perfectly. That's the beauty of all of these different distribution models and companies and channels that are available for independent authors to take advantage of with really just reduce barriers. Nobody's going out and financing out of their own pocket, ordering thousands of copies and storing them in their basement. Sort of gone are those days. And now it's just a matter of making sure you have all your ducks in the row and your files set up correctly and all your, your book description just tweaked just so and your pricing set right. And you get all that and you upload it to whichever the major companies you're working with. And then boom, your book is available everywhere.
It's crazy to see that process come to life in the physical manifestation of a book and to see the authors who very often tag us on social media or submit videos of their unboxing. It is just such an inspiring and powerful moment for them in their journey, and amazing that we get to be such a small part in that as well. So you've chatted a little bit about the different platforms that are available, the different options that are available for authors. Can you dive a little bit into what that looks like? Because as you mentioned, early on in the self-publishing and publishing in general industry, it was very much, if you are publishing a book, you are hustling and slinging copies of books out of your basement, sitting on stock, potentially hundreds or thousands of copies of books. So how has that landscape changed?
Yeah, it's changed completely. Like fundamentally, it's completely flipped, where if you want to go full DIY, do it all yourself, set up your own accounts, you can do it for free. Like you can publish a book for $0 and 0 cents and make it available with nothing but your obvious time and effort. And you're going to have to learn some things along the ways, but it's really eliminated that kind of big barrier where all you need is a book and it needs to be formatted correctly for whichever platform you're using. And then really, one kind of interesting thing about the way maybe it used to be is, okay, you've invested all this time, you're printing books. Well, you better hustle now. You better get going. And so one of the, I'm on the Demystifying Self-Publishing podcast here. So, one maybe thing to demystify is that just making that book available even though it's easy and it could be even free and your book is going to be available everywhere. Well, guess what? Lots of other people have queued into that as well, and the market is filled with books that are available for. So, the marketing and having a robust marketing strategy that you're really hustling with is, that other piece of the equation that's also really important.
I think that's a valid point for sure. I think oftentimes, the production of the book has been completed, and then maybe one of those misconceptions is, okay, my work here is done. Now my book is available to the public and it's going to start to sell, and I just have to sit back and wait for my royalties to start flooding in. And of course, when it comes to the success of a book or the marketing of a book, you very much get out of it what you put into it. And so I think noting that is really important as well. So oftentimes we do see kind of just the finished product of a book. So you've talked a little bit about, setting pricing, book description, formatting. What are some of those behind the scenes steps that happen to get a book from everything is finalized from a design perspective, now it's ready to be purchased online?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, similar to distribution and marketing always go hand in hand. And similar to when you're marketing a book, you actually start the marketing process at the very beginning when you decide who am I writing my book for and how am I going to reach my target audience? Who are
Absolutely.
they and what do they want to find in my book? And similar with distribution, it starts from the beginning where you're like, okay, what do I want my final book to look like? Let's talk about print for a minute. So do I want to have a hardcover book with a dust jacket in a certain size on a certain stock of paper? It's going to actually impact which distribution channel I'm going to be able to use. And maybe more importantly, it's going to impact the price that it's going to cost to print each unit of that book, which
Right.
is in turn going to impact the price you're going to have to charge your readers to purchase that book. And that, of course, goes back to the marketing because price is part of that mix as well. So distribution happens way from the very, very beginning. So it's, what are the specifications going to be on my book? So what's it going to cost to print a unit of this book? And then you finalize that design according to whatever those specs are. And you have yourself we call them channel files. So they're files that are ready to be uploaded to the distribution channels that you've decided to use, whether that's print on demand or ebook or audiobook, or kind of the three main ones. So you've got your files, and then you've got your metadata is the other piece. And that's what I was talking about with book description, with biography of the author. It's choosing what am I going to write under my own name or under a pen name. It's are there other contributors that I'm going to credit in the writing of my book, and the biggest ones we talk about are keywords, categories, and suggested retail price. Those are kind of the big three, maybe. And of course, keywords and categories, these are the words and categories that are going to help readers find your book. And the pricing is obviously what you're selling, and that's going to determine your royalty. So already, I've been talking for probably too long answering this question, and we haven't even reached publication yet. So there's lots of little steps that happen along the way. But having your book ready, having your metadata set, and then uploading those to whichever platforms you're working with, going through their approval process, and then boom, it should be ready and going to whatever retailers that distribution channel you've chosen, feeds the book to.
So you have mentioned how distribution and marketing are very closely intertwined and starts kind of right at the beginning of the writing or the publishing journey. And I think when we're talking about things like the metadata, that's a really great example of how distribution and marketing are kind of merging very closely as well when it comes to this post-production process, because we're looking at things like, as you mentioned, the keywords that a user might be searching on Amazon to find their next read, or different topics, the categories, and all of that also aids in where the book ranks on these different purchasing platforms as well. So I think that that's something that is often not considered. We sign into Amazon, we type something in, and It's already displayed there for us in a book's listing. And we don't often give much thought about the process behind that, how those keywords are established or how the categories are chosen. And so making that connection between distribution and marketing, I think, is really important because there is very much that marriage that happens between the two.
Absolutely. I think discoverability is a word that I'm not 100% sure is actually a word, but
It can be
it
for the
gets
purpose of this.
it gets used a lot. I read that word a lot. It's you're trying to make your book discoverable to readers, and again, in a really, really crowded marketplace. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
heck, on Amazon, it's crowded just with other products that might have the same name as your book. Let alone other books in the same marketplace. There's lots of different ways you're trying to make your book stand out and be found, primarily via searches, which is what people are doing. And ideally, you're combining that with a nice, you know, organic audience that you've built and you're communicating with in other ways through email campaigns and social media and whatever other ways you're engaging with some sort of audience that you have built, because then you can direct them directly to your purchase link. That's a great way, because obviously relying on people searching Amazon to find your book is a little fraught, because of, again, how many other products are vying for those same keywords. And it reminds me of like how every snowflake is unique. It's like even though there's millions and millions of books out there available for purchase, your book still probably has some like really unique combination of keywords and categories that people out there are looking for and are going to search. And so it's a matter of doing some neat kind of different super nerdy research to find those combinations if you're so motivated and that's part of your goals, and you're wanting to do that. Not everybody does. Some people are publishing for friends and family, and that's great too.
Definitely. And firstly, spoken like a true Canadian, I would say, who's now living in more of the eastern part of the country with that snowflake analogy. But I think something else is the fact that that's an ongoing process. We often encounter things like stagnant book sales, which I myself, if I'm not actively promoting my book, the sales aren't just coming in magically. So going in and starting those conversations again, or maybe tweaking some of the keywords, tweaking categories if you're not seeing the right kind of success, is also something to be mindful of. It's not always that the initial categories and keywords are the ones that are going to position your book for your readers. So I think that there is a lot of trial and error that comes with it as well.
Absolutely. And before this interview, you were kind enough to send me some questions and some different notes to help me prepare. And one word I saw mentioned was life cycle, and that really stuck out for me, because I think one thing that's neat about the independent publishing world and these new modes of distribution, like print on demand, which is when a book is printed and fulfilled and shipped at the point of sale. They're not being printed in advance in large quantities. And this is sort of what makes that technology is what makes the whole thing possible. So the fact that you're able to just have a book up available print on demand, that means you can just leave your book can stay available live for sale online. You don't have to worry about your first initial print run running out and then hoping that your publisher is going to do another run because they think it can sell. It doesn't matter. You can trigger a marketing campaign at any point, even if your book's already been released for a long time, or you can republish a second edition with relative ease. And you can also pretty easily make changes to the content of the book. You can tweak keywords in a matter of like a few minutes in many cases. You can tweak categories. Sometimes these changes take a little bit of time to make their way out to all of the different retailers, which all have their own sort of search algorithms. But absolutely, it's an ongoing process. And I think that's one of the things that's really neat about indie publishing, is that in some ways the life cycle is like very short for so many things. In today's world, people have fads come and go so quickly, but in other ways, a book is a lasting piece, and it's nice that it can stay available for many, many years if you want it to.
I think that's a great thing to recognize because so many people are motivated by this idea of legacy and leaving behind a legacy. And so talking about that life cycle and the fact that you can publish a book and it can live on online for people to find and happen upon in the years to come really kind of emphasizes the accuracy behind that motivation for an author. Now, you had chatted about print on demand and ebooks and audiobooks. What is the distribution process like for each of those individual formats? I know when it comes to a physical copy of a book, formatting, of course, is incredibly important, and it varies depending on if it's a paperback, if it's hard copy, depending on the size. There's so many different things that go into it. It's not simply upload your manuscript and it's going to magically be printed accurately in every size or format of your book. So can you chat a little bit about that and how it differs from the different formats?
Totally. And I will say that there are common themes is that you need a properly formatted source file for whichever channel you're going. So an ebook also has very specific requirements. It requires, you can do like a conversion from a Word document to an EPUB file for your different readers that different people or devices that the readers are going to be using. But it needs to be formatted in a very specific way for, for a Kindle device or for a Kobo device or for Full Books store to show correctly through their applications or through Draft to Digital and the different applications that they make the book available to. So formatting still is really important. So I think working with a professional of some kind, or you're super motivated and obsessed to learn how to, do it all yourself, but really working with somebody who understands some of the issues that you might run into is really key. So consistent between all three is having files created according to sort of stringent requirements, you could call them, which are in place so that the reader has a good experience with the book, and or so that it doesn't, cause problems for the printers and quality issues. Again, it's all about the reader experience at the end. The other piece is, again, you're going to have metadata in each of these different cases. So again, metadata is all that data information that accompanies the book and tells the reader on the online platform what they need to know about the book. And so you set that up in much the same way, whether it's a print book, an ebook, or an audiobook. Again, there's little differences between the different platforms, but the general principle stays consistent there. A big difference between the three is royalties and how they're calculated. So the royalty is the amount the author is paid for each copy sold. And with a print book, obviously, you have a highly variable print cost, which depends on the length of the book and the size of the book and whether it's color or black and white. And all these things drive the print cost up or down. And consequently, you need to set your retail price higher or lower to choose a royalty that you're happy with. So there's a little bit more complexity there. And again, that's impacted on the way you set your book up, as I mentioned earlier. With ebooks, it's more of like a straight percentage, usually 60 to 70% of the list price is what you get back in the royalty. And with audiobooks, actually, when you're publishing through Audible, they set the price for you roughly based on the length of the audiobook. So that's one way that's a little bit different from the others. And again, and with audiobooks, you're thinking, oh, there's no files to set up. Well, absolutely, there's audio files and there's audio recordings. Those all need to be, again, for the reader's experience. If you hear a bad audio recording, it's very, very obvious and very unpleasant to listen to in most cases. So again, the distributor knows that. They want to protect, the reputation of their sort of marketplace. So they have very strict requirements on audio files and levels and background noise and all these different things that you have to adhere to when you upload your various chapters as recordings. So that's a little bit about the similarities and differences between the three formats.
I think is really helpful for our audience to know. I think there oftentimes is maybe a bit of a discrepancy between what we think the process looks like, what the options are available to us, or somebody thinking that they can maybe record their entire audiobook themselves using devices at home, which is not the case in every situation or in majority of situations. So that's great. Thank you for breaking all of that down. So how important would you say is having access to the global distribution model in today's self-publishing world, and what are some of those challenges that authors may experience with that?
Well, I think whenever you're talking about self-publishing and you ask how important something is, it absolutely depends on the author and their goals for the book. I think this is one of the things that makes self-publishing very beautiful is it's very much about empowering individuals to bring their book into the world in whatever way they want to do it. And I think that's, really important. I had a friend who publishes these little kids books. He is just a passion of his. He likes to write kids books, print them off, and he sits at the farmer's market on the weekend and sells them at the farmer's market. And he loves to do that, and he gets a lot out of that process. Likes talking to people. I think that's super sweet if that's what you want to do. And he absolutely does not need print on demand in Ireland to be able to, fulfill that sort of goal of his.
Right.
For most authors, they have a different goal. They're looking to leave a legacy based on a lifetime body of work and knowledge and expertise that they've developed, and they really want to translate that into a piece of work that's available for people anywhere in the world who are interested in what they're doing. And maybe you are a professional of some kind and you are building a consultancy built business or a coaching business, and you're building your sales funnel, and your book is your hook, and it's your social proof, and it's what you're using to build legitimacy for yourself and establish yourself as an authority. Well, absolutely, you're probably going to want to hit people in many different markets. And even if you're just looking to hit people in your own province or state or one country, you still need to work with some sort of platform that's going to make that book available everywhere with, again, limited sort of upfront costs, probably because you can. So why wouldn't you? So I think the barriers are low. So if you want to reach people and you don't want to be limited by, physical distribution that you set up yourself, then you're absolutely going to want to work with Ingram Spark or Kindle Direct Publishing or Kobo or Draft to Digital or all of them.
So on the topic of people who are, maybe content with running a booth at a farmer's market or doing a local bookstore signing and selling books there or at a vendor fair versus people who are looking to be able to reach that wider audience, things like subscription-based services, Kindle Unlimited, have now become an option for authors as well. How do you think authors can kind of weigh the trade-off between being exclusive and reaching a larger audience? Does that, again, just kind of go back to what the author's hoping to get from their publishing process?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a different question, but I do think it does still come back to what the author's goal is and what they're trying to achieve. Absolutely. Again, I think if you have a high value product, like maybe it's a professional manual of some kind, probably not going to want to make that available on Kindle Unlimited for anybody to sort of have it available on demand. You're probably going to want to charge a high price for that and have it available in print, or you're going to try to make a profit and generate sales through that sort of one channel or a few different channels in print, as opposed to taking advantage of a subscription model. I think for a lot of different fiction writers, if you're looking to, you want to start writing, multiple titles and creating series and building a fan base and engaging with your fan base, or you are simply interested in reaching as many readers as possible and really profit's not your motive, you just really want your book out there. Either of those cases, I think, you want to get all the subscription models you can possibly sign up for. You just want to get your book far and wide. And that's probably a really good solution for that kind of author.
Absolutely. I think about authors like Frida McFadden, who has number of books available on Kindle Unlimited, is continuously releasing new works. But I imagine, some of the works that are a little bit older or maybe less known versus the works that she continues to publish are made available to encourage people to then follow her, fall in love with her work, and continue to support her in other ways as that journey continues, which is a great opportunity for authors, as you mentioned, who are looking maybe to release a series or multiple books within a similar genre and try to get their name out there, their works out there, and to start to build that reader base. So if we're thinking about people using Kindle Unlimited, and again, they don't care maybe that much about the profit and are more trying to get their book in front of a larger viewership, what would you say is the best model from the perspective of someone who alternatively is trying to really maximize their profits? Now, there are many different motivating factors, I think, for different authors. And of course, for some authors, it is that financial component. And we do offer different royalty models. So can you break down what that looks like?
Yeah, so with Kindle Unlimited, I think it's something that you can also take advantage of for a short period of time to, try to boost your exposure and then shift over to something that's trying to find serious readers to purchase copies of your book. And when we talk about royalties, we're always talking about, the term we use is net royalties, and that's basically the maximum amount of money an author could make off of a sale after the distributor takes their cut and the retailer takes their cut. Mm-hmm. And what's left is the net royalty, and that's what's available to the author. And that net royalty is what has sort of historically been cut into fairly significantly by traditional publishers. And that's when you talk about like royalty share between a publisher and an author, maybe a lot of the times, authors, depending on the deal, are getting like a very small cut of that. And even sometimes, in the self-assisted self-publishing realm, you do have companies that are sort of inflating the price or like forcing the author to increase their price, and then the publisher is kind of taking another one of those cuts. So then, you've got your price you're setting, and then the distributor's taking a cut, the retailer's taking a cut, the publisher's taking a cut, and then what's left is going to the author. Mm-hmm. There's a number of different ways that publishers can take a cut. Some are more transparent. Like for us, we have one model, which is, no setup fee, and it's 85% of your net royalties. And, that sort of 15% is what we use to basically fulfill the service of uploading the book and providing ongoing support after, and consolidating royalties and paying those royalties out and paying the little transaction fees that come along with that, and being available to answer questions and resolve issues with retailer listings in the future. So we just have that one option, whereas 15% comes off, that goes to us, and the rest goes to the author, 85%. And we also offer a 100% option, which comes with a setup fee up front, which again covers all of those same sort of activities that I just mentioned. Mm-hmm. So the net royalty is what the author is trying to maximize. And they can also maximize that net royalty by doing things like making sure they're printing their book, choosing like a smart, setup for their book. If they don't need color, don't print in color. Use a font size that's reasonable, and go with a small trim size if you can, and do all of those things to try to keep your print costs down. Those are ways that you can kind of make sure you're maximizing the return on each copy sold. And then from there, there's also, the pricing strategy where, you're going to want to set a price that's going to yield a certain amount for you per copy sold without pricing yourself out of your specific genre. So it's a little bit of a threading the needle between finding out what's competitive in your genre while also making sure you're setting a high enough price to, have some left over for yourself after the other big players take their pieces.
I think something that is jumping out here is the idea that I chatted a little bit about with Mitch in an earlier episode, who is our longest tenured publishing consultant, and he was helping to kind of
Shout out, Mitch.
shout out to Mitch. He was helping to debunk some of the myths around self-publishing. And I think, one thing that really seems to come up a lot in online forums and conversation is this idea that somehow self-publishing is less profitable than traditional publishing. And he kind of broke down, if you sell the same number of books at the same price point through a traditional publisher or as a self-published author, there's no way you could ever make more money than being a self-published author because there isn't the same amount of overhead that a traditional publisher requires or takes in terms of their cuts.
Absolutely.
And another thing is you chatted about the pricing structure and how to price a book competitively and choosing things like an appropriate trim size and font size. But I think something else that's important to recognize is that some companies, some assisted self-publishing companies do gatekeep print-ready files. And it can be difficult for an author to then potentially make the most that they're able to because they can't access those files and take them to a preferred printer and maybe get a more competitive price.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing I appreciate about Tellwell's approach, and just speaking, personally, is the flexibility and transparency that's inherent. And I think if I'm an author, that's what I'm looking for. And
Mm-hmm.
if we're the only people that offer transparency and flexibility, well, you certainly, get it in spades. And I think the ability to, if you want to go fully DIY and set your own book up and you want to have your own full control over your own distribution account, because then you can make changes yourself directly really quickly, and you can run Amazon ads yourself in a more effective way, and you can sort of have a slightly faster, sort of you keep your finger on the pulse of things a little bit more closely if you want to do that. Most people don't, but again, if you do decide that you want that, then that's great to have that flexibility. Yeah, if you want to, go do a print run. I mean, printing books is not cheap. I mean, none of this is particularly. I mean, I've talked about how you can distribute your book for nothing, but I mean, working with books are long and take a lot of work to produce, and
Mm-hmm.
printed books are really, they take a lot of material, and ink is one of the is it like the most expensive material or something like it's really expensive ink, and by weight, it does cost a bit of money to print books, so definitely you're going to want to shop around and find the best deal that you can get, so to be able to have the files that you need. And we often have authors and they find a local printer that they get a good deal with, and they take the files, and then our files are set up for these specific printers, and their printer needs a small adjustment, so we make the little adjustment for them, and then they're able to get their print run. And we do little things like that. We try to sort of go the extra mile as much as we can just to help enable authors to, again, meet their goals. What's really important to them, and we don't want to stand in the way of that.
Something that I was pleasantly surprised by when I started was how we celebrate authors and their successes internally. It's something that an author may never see or hear that we do, but even just through our internal messaging system, posting an author's recent award or a book launch or an unboxing video. And I think that in itself is a testament to how much value we place on an author's publishing journey and their success and them getting kind of what they want out of the journey. And so you mentioning, the transparency and making these little tweaks and not wanting to inhibit an author or stand in their way, I think also just kind of validates that as well. So how do you see the future of book distribution evolving over the next few years, especially with the rise of things like AI and new technologies?
Yeah. I mean, let's start with the bad news. I think the bad news is that the market is just going to continue to be flooded by content because it's just becoming easier and easier and easier to develop content. So I think just competition is going to increase. It's going to continue to increase. With that said, I think that the value placed on human output, human creative, like human creativity and the works produced thereby, that's going to continue to be valued by the marketplace. So I think if you are a author that is serious about putting your heart and soul into a book and releasing it into the world and putting a good effort behind that, there's going to continue to be an audience for that. I think there are going to continue to be more and more interesting ways that books and creative output are brought to people. And it's just going to continue to be like more and more ways that happens, and lower barriers. And as the barriers get lower, the competition continues to increase. I think I kind of see that sort of cycle continuing. That's sort of my personal prediction. I think that we will see interesting different stances on AI produce, like, KDP, for example, they already distinguish between AI assisted and AI generated content, but they're only asking for you to kind of self-report that. And to my knowledge, I don't know how closely they're monitoring that, but they sort of say that AI assisted is fine and AI generated is, we may reserve the risk to remove that. So there's probably going to continue to be some push and pull, and probably different camps where if you're a fully human powered writer, you can probably sort of shout that from the mountaintops and be like, hey, I'm this is totally created human powered, and you're probably going to have an audience that are really going to appreciate that.
It's a badge of honor at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then I think reader behaviors are just changing all the time. The way people want to consume
Mm.
their books is always changing. I think it's interesting that we continue to see print formats outselling all other formats for our authors. I think again that's been predicted for many years to have changed by now, and still there is still something about holding a physical book in your hand that kind of stands the test of time. So if I think of the future of publishing, I kind of see physical books are a part of that for sure.
Yeah.
But then also I think subscription service, and there is, I think, in the consumer base, in the consumer sphere, there is this expectation, I think, growing that everything is available at your fingertips, whenever you want it, and you want to be able to like pay for one subscription and have that one kind of monthly payment deliver you more content that you can possibly consume. So that's I imagine that's going to continue.
I think about, you know, a physical in-person book club getting together versus now having book talk on TikTok, or having an online virtual book club, book chat, or even like online forums where people are recommending different books to each other, and they're very much separated by how people are consuming. So it might be, I'm part of a Kindle Facebook group where people are suggesting different reads on Kindle because of things like Kindle Unlimited, what's available there for them, or even,
right.
Libby, which allows for you to rent an ebook through your library. There's so many different ways,
Love
as
Libby.
you mentioned.
I'm personally a big fan.
Big fan. We're endorsing Libby, but not sponsored by Libby. And it's just really impactful to see how the industry continues to change and evolve. And as you mentioned, how people's habits around consuming content continue to change and evolve. So it'll be really interesting to see where that goes in the next few years.
Absolutely. And you mentioned book clubs and Libby, which is that's libraries making the book available through an app, which I think that's a really cool thing that we've figured out to do. And we both have young kids, and libraries are such a great meeting place for families and for kids to be able to go, and whether you're a kid or an adult, humans like to talk to each other and connect with one another, and doing so in person is definitely something that's not going anywhere. It may temporarily be halted by certain events, but it's always going to come back. And holding tactile things is something that's very human and enjoyable, whether it's, a baby putting a book in their mouth, or, a human holding it and reading it. And so I think
Definitely.
reading will always, continue to be impacted by those human desires and needs.
I think libraries also, continuing the conversation there, is, they're another really big supporter of local authors. They often will host, local author readings. They will be the first to, take the books in and put them on the shelves and display them. There's a lot of pride behind having somebody from your community who has produced something that is tangible or inspiring or that educates. And so I agree that, while we are seeing this evolution in technology, that there's still always, I think, going to be a place for that tangible and physical kind of content.
Totally. And maybe I'll just talk about libraries just for another moment. And if you want to hear me prattle on about extremely minute details about distribution that I really want all of our authors to know about, and we have a distribution webinar and we go into some more details. And we haven't talked about a lot of sort of like nuts and bolts details in this, and I don't think we should, because I think a lot of them are kind of boring. And go and investigate our resource center and read some articles on it if you're interested. One of those big print-on-demand distributors, Ingram Spark, they make pretty much every major library is going to have an account with Ingram Spark. And just to illustrate how, print on demand makes books available to sort of more independent or local booksellers or book purveyors like libraries, is, any business or library that has an account with Ingram Spark can order any book that's been published through that distributor. But I mean, a big part of making your book available is yourself acting as authorpreneur, again, getting on the marketing side and hustling and talking to people and getting out into your community. No library is just going to automatically stock every book by every self-published author. They would run out of money very quickly. So you have to give them a nudge and hey, look at me, I'm a member of the community and I published this book. Wouldn't it be great if you carried it in your library? And if you're nice about it, they probably will. So nice and persistent. I think that's your method for consignment and library deals and things like that.
Definitely. That was one thing that was a big learning process for myself through the publishing process was, how I could translate my electronic book or the print on demand to being something that is held in physical bookstores. And that pitch process, the research, the connection was a big component of seeing my book, my physical book, in a physical bookstore, which, have to say, there's no feeling like it. It's incredible to walk into an Indigo or a Chapters and see your book on the shelf and be able to pull it out and say, like, holy cow, like, I did that. That is a very cool thing.
Yeah, wipe the dust off your shoulder like no big deal. Yeah, you should
Exactly.
absolutely be very proud of that, Alyssa. That's
Yeah.
a special accomplishment for sure. That's an exciting
Thanks.
moment of gratification.
Definitely. But I think that it's one of those things that, like we've kind of been talking about throughout the episode, is you very much get out what you put in. There are different methods available, models available, depending on what you hope to get out of your publishing journey, whether that is, being okay with having more exposure or trying to maximize your profits or leave a legacy, or, putting in that little bit of extra work to see your book in a physical store or on a shelf at a library. So the options for authors and for self-published authors especially are really quite limitless when you think about it.
Exactly. And each of these journeys that you're talking about, like the journey of, taking your published book and making it available and out in the world. I think it's a little bit anxiety provoking for a lot of people, standing behind your book and putting it out there and taking the effortful steps to promote it and to, again, be visible and be seen with it. And it does not have to be. I think, authors can take some solace in the fact that that is a shared experience. It's not uncommon to be nervous about embarking on the marketing journey and telling people about your book, but it's absolutely one that is available to you and is not out of the realm of possibility for really anybody.
Definitely. So we have our last segment now, which is my favorite, The Plot Thickens. This is a segment that involves user-submitted questions. So for our listeners, if you aren't yet following us, please be sure to check us out on Instagram at Tellwell Publishing. I always put a call out on our stories asking for people to submit questions. And today's question involves the capacity of your role. So you're an operations manager, which oversees a lot of intricate moving parts. What would you say is the biggest challenge of your role, and also contrastly, the most rewarding part of your role?
I'm really tempted to sort of say the same thing for each. I think the most satisfying and exciting thing about my role is all of the moving parts, all of the different people that I get to interact with, all of the different, and no 2 days are the same. And like I said, the process of publishing a book is quite a long journey involving many different steps. And every one of those steps has a process at Tellwell in place and has help resources and requires the people fulfilling that step to be trained and to have access to certain tools and certain information. And so I need to make sure that all of those pieces are in place. And, that means that I get to work on lots of different things. It's marketing team one week and it's the editing team the next day, and I'm diving deep dive into like helping support the creation of a new design productivity tracker another day, and then I'm like all over the map. And so I think simultaneously the biggest challenge is absolutely like depth of work and being able to like stay focused on good deep work that really like moves the needle and creates a meaningful impact and change, instead of just sort of moving from place to place, kind of like reacting. It's being able to be proactive and enacting processes and resources and creating new things, finding the time to do that well. And that can be challenging.
Absolutely. It makes sense that it would be, because as you mentioned, you have your hands in a lot of different moving parts and different teams, and it would be extremely, I think, challenging for anybody to try to, be able to oversee and react where needed, but also try to plant some of those seeds along the way that can produce things later on that make for a more streamlined or, impactful team or process.
And it's not brain surgery, but it's not super straightforward either. So, somewhere in between.
For sure.
I'm sitting on the couch twiddling my thumbs and brain surgery, somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there, that obscure area.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that I like to do with Tellwell team members through this podcast is rapid fire questions. So I think it's a great way for authors or prospective authors and our audience to get to know some of the people that work within our company. And so I'm going to read off a couple things, and just the first thing that comes to mind will work for an answer. These you didn't get to see ahead of time because it just adds a little extra excitement.
Yeah, for the record, I have not seen these questions before. I have no idea what's coming, and I have now broken into a cold sweat.
Sorry about that. Okay, first question. What is one thing you can't be without at your workstation?
Oh, water.
Oh, okay. You have, I feel like, a really great setup for a workstation. Like you've got the standing desk, right? So I was wondering what direction we were going to go with for that. But water is very
if I'm using the standing desk,
the
anti-fatigue squishy mat that I'm standing on is also very, very important for sure.
Okay.
But I gotta stay hydrated. Gotta go water.
Good answer. What is your favorite read at the moment?
Ooh, so I mentioned young children earlier.
Mm,
A new baby pretty recently. I haven't been doing a whole lot of reading, but what
children's
I've
books?
been, yeah. Okay, yeah. Let's go with Grover's Alphabet. Grover's
Amazing.
Alphabet.
High up on the list. High up on the list.
Hey, Sesame Street's coming under fire a little bit lately, so I gotta stand up for Grover.
Yeah, we need to, for sure. As people who grew up in a generation that was very pro Sesame Street, they need our support now more than ever.
Hmm.
Next question, coffee or tea?
Coffee all day, espresso, Americano.
Same. And last but not least, are you a physical book or an e-reader person? If you had to pick one.
I've been going hard on the Libby as of late, just pick any book available in the library and boom, it's there, ready to read.
Amazing.
And if I'm not on Libby, then it's physical book.
That's fair. One of the compromises that I recently made for myself when it comes to purchasing physical versus reading on my Kindle, which I tend to do a lot more of, having young kids and being up in the night.
Hmm.
I told myself that if I make a purchase of a physical book, it needs to be a special or limited edition version of the book. So
Right, that makes sense. So if you're gonna make that discretionary purchase, you may as well make it as expensive as you possibly can. That's good call.
right. Great for the wallet and great
Yeah,
for the aesthetic of our household.
yeah.
So
Alyssa doesn't do anything halfway, folks.
never.
She's going for it.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Simon. It's been great chatting about distribution and royalties, and I think that this will be a really enlightening conversation for people who maybe don't think about everything that goes in behind the scenes to a book during that post-production process. For everybody listening, you can tune in on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And be sure to check out the full video on YouTube. We'll see you in the next one.